What a man thinks when he sees that your dignity is stronger than your love for him is not beautiful, not tender, and not pleasant. It is devastating to his ego, because in this moment he loses not only affection, he loses position. This video does not exist to comfort you or inflate your self-esteem. It exists to show you the exact psychological mechanism that activates when he discovers that he can no longer have you at any cost. And when that happens, nothing feels the same for either of you. Here you will hear the 6 real mental steps his mind goes through when your dignity prevails, from the initial confusion through the inner break to the moment when the dynamic is permanently reversed. If you leave before the end, you miss the most dangerous and decisive part, the part that separates the woman who gives in again from the woman who will never again be taken for granted. This is not ordinary content. It is the message you must hear in full if you don't want to lose yourself again out of love. Jung warned that no one confronts another human being without first confronting their own shadow. And that is exactly what happens here. Your dignity forces him to see what he has avoided. If any of this is already resonating with you, subscribe and write "I read you" in the comments. That way YouTube understands that this reflection deserves to go further, because when you hear this at the right moment, it doesn't change your mood. It changes the inner structure from which you love. Step 1. The moment he realizes you are no longer negotiable. Listen carefully, because here a very common fantasy breaks. A man does not realize he is losing you when you leave. He realizes it when he can no longer move you internally. It is not a sentence, not a stated boundary, not an emotional scene. It is a silent shift of your inner position. And when it happens, he senses it long before he can explain it in words. I want to illustrate this with a real case. Chris Bell came to a counseling session with a story that repeats itself more often than you would imagine. Loving, deep, committed. She did not beg, did not chase, did not create scenes. From the outside, anyone would say she has dignity. But internally, she was silently negotiating, excusing absences, waiting too long, tolerating small inconsistencies so as not to be inconvenient. Until something changed, not on the outside, but inside, and this movement activated the first real break in his mind. For years, Crisbell confused patience with mature love. She believed that understanding meant giving in, that adapting meant caring, and without noticing it, she taught her inner system, and his, that her space could stretch without breaking. Every long wait, every lukewarm answer, every accumulated "it's okay," formed a silent dynamic. There was no malice, but also no growth. Because when you adapt too much, the other person never feels the urgency to get aligned, and this is perceived even if unspoken. The break did not come with a door slam or with tears. It came on the day Crisbell stopped explaining herself too much. Something didn't sit right with her, and she no longer justified it. Something tightened inside her, and she no longer swallowed it. She didn't leave, didn't threaten, didn't complain. She simply stopped betraying herself in small ways. This gesture, as invisible as it is radical, reconfigures everything, because when you return to yourself, your energy stops pleading, stops adjusting the other person so he won't leave, and that feels like an immediate loss of access. Here appears the first masculine mental reaction. It is not fear yet, it is discomfort. He doesn't understand what has changed. He only senses that something no longer reacts the same. Your silence weighs differently. Your boundaries no longer sound defensive. Your presence no longer offers itself the way it used to. And this forces him to observe, not to take care of you, but to reposition himself. Because when a woman stops being negotiable without announcing it, a man faces a new feeling. The dynamic he took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Jung would say that at this point, the shadow is activated. The part of the psyche that reacts when emotional control is lost. Not dominance, but access. He does not think, I'm going to lose her. He thinks something deeper. I no longer understand from what place I relate to her. Before, when Crisbell left, he lost a woman. Now, when she left, he lost a comfortable inner position, and that creates more confusion than physical absence. Because love can be replaced, but embodied dignity cannot. It is important that you see this clearly. This does not happen when you leave. It happens when you make 3 inner movements. You stop staying where your body tightens just to maintain the relationship. You stop explaining yourself to someone who is not prepared to listen to you. You start making small decisions aligned with yourself, even if the other person doesn't like them. Not to provoke, but to respect yourself. When you do that, you don't become cold, you become clear. And clarity is deeply intimidating for someone who was comfortable inside your emotional ambiguity. The man begins to measure, to observe timing, words, reactions, not because you are manipulating, but because you stopped manipulating yourself so he would stay. Here his fantasy breaks. She is always there. And when that certainty falls, his mind enters alert mode. This is not love yet. It is reorganization. Because no one values what feels unconditional, but they do value what has silent boundaries. That is the true beginning of psychological respect. Many women believe that dignity is hardness. No, dignity is inner coherence sustained over time. Crisbell did not become distant. She became integral. And that activated a dangerous question in him. What place do I hold now? You are no longer reaction. You are presence. You no longer chase, you choose. And this constant choosing, without speaking, disarms any dynamic based on convenience. There is no punishment here, only structure, and structure orders more than any declaration of love. This step is silent but irreversible, because once your system learns that it does not need to tense itself in order to love, it cannot go back. He feels it even if he does not name it. He knows something has changed, that he can no longer rely on your emotional flexibility, and that forces him to define himself, grow or retreat. Both options are born from the same point, your return to yourself, not from an external threat, but from an inner integrity that no longer negotiates. I want you to keep this sentence as an anchor, because it changes the entire playing field. I do not need to leave to stop being negotiable. I need to return to myself. When you integrate this, the bond stops sustaining itself through inertia, and the masculine mind begins, when comfort is lost, to compare not with the old you, but with every other woman who does not embody this level of coherence. And that is where something even deeper begins. In the next step, we will enter this critical point. Why does your dignity activate more respect than all the love you have given? Because without you noticing, he begins to measure what he had with you against what he can no longer obtain so easily. This is the moment when the inner game becomes irreversible, and when you stop being a memory and become a reference. Step 2, why your dignity activates more respect than all the love you gave together. It hurts, but it liberates. Love, when it has no structure, becomes landscape. It is there, it holds, but it does not order. What truly reorganizes a man's mind is the inner form from which you love. When you love without giving yourself up, when you do not reduce yourself to fit, he can no longer read you from a place of comfort. And this quiet, firm change carries more weight than any emotional promise you ever made. The common mistake is to believe that giving more love creates more commitment. No, it creates more habit. Dignity, on the other hand, introduces a new variable: consistency, not punishment, not coldness, coherence. Jung explained that the psyche respects what has contour. When you have clear inner boundaries, the other person senses that there is something they cannot cross without transforming themselves, and that awakens respect even before it awakens desire, because now he does not possess you emotionally. He must position himself before you. Here, an unconscious comparison takes place. He begins to contrast. He will not verbalize it, but he feels it. Your current presence compared to the past version that always adapted. Your calm compared to your old waiting. And this comparison creates inattention, because before, your love was guaranteed. Now, your access is not. And when access is no longer certain, the male mind enters evaluation, not romantically, but strategically. Do I rise or do I lose this place? This question marks a before and an after. Many women believe this is manipulation. No, it is not. Manipulation would be changing yourself to provoke a reaction. Here, you are not changing for him, you are changing out of coherence with yourself, and that feels different. Your energy no longer pushes, demands, or adapts. It simply is. And this stable presence without effort disarms more than any speech, because he can no longer rely on your emotional flexibility to remain the same. Now he must either grow or feel uncomfortable until he leaves. In counseling, this moment appears in their confused statements. I don't know what's happening to me. I feel her differently. It used to be easier. Easy is not love. It is access without consequence. And when that is lost, something new appears. Genuine attention, not always healthy, not always mature, but attention at last, because your dignity forced his system to awaken, not from fear of losing you physically, but from the feeling of losing an inner place that provided safety without effort. This is where many women doubt and step back. When he begins approaching differently, measuring, being more attentive, the temptation arises to give in again. And that is where everything is decided, because if you use your dignity as a strategy, it dissolves, but if you sustain it as identity, it solidifies. Jung would say, this is the moment when the bond stops being projection and becomes conscious choice. And not everyone is ready to choose from that place. Your dignity does not guarantee that he stays. It guarantees something more important, that you do not lose yourself. And paradoxically, that is what has the greatest impact, because you no longer move out of fear of losing him. You move out of respect for your inner axis, and this emotional autonomy shifts the balance. He is no longer the evaluator. Now he is the one who must understand whether he can rise to the level of coherence you embody without announcing it. This respect is not born from sacrifice. It is born from boundaries. Not from drama, but from sustained calm. When you no longer react from hurt, but from clarity, he cannot play on the same level as before. And that is uncomfortable, but it also awakens him. Because dignity does not seduce like attachment, but it leaves a trace that is not easily erased, even when the relationship ends. You become an inner reference, not a romantic memory. I want you to see this without idealization. Some men grow in the face of this, others withdraw. Both outcomes are coherent. What changes is that you no longer negotiate your center to keep someone. And when your love comes from there, it stops being a constant offering. It becomes a shared choice. That is the difference between being desired and being respected. And the male mind, even if it does not admit it, always knows when it is facing the latter. In the next step, we will enter an even more delicate zone. What happens when he begins to feel fear? Not fear of losing you, but fear of not being enough to keep you. There appear contradictory behaviors, approaches, and retreats, silent tests. And if you do not understand this point, you can confuse intensity with love. But if you do understand it, you remain steady while the dynamic reverses itself completely from the inside. Step 3. When respect begins to turn into silent fear. It is not the childish fear of losing you, it is the adult fear of not being enough. Here the male mind enters contradiction. He wants to come closer, but fears exposing himself. He seeks you and then withdraws, not because he is playing, but because his identity is being reorganized. Your dignity forces him to look at himself without the cushion of your availability, and this activates inner fear, even if he outwardly maintains calm or distance. This fear does not express itself in clear words. It appears as ambiguity, lukewarm messages, intense gestures followed by long silences. He tests whether you are still there, but no longer from the same place. And when he notices that you no longer react as before, that you do not chase, that you do not complain, the unease grows, because now he can no longer regulate himself through your emotional response. Jung would call this a collision with the true self, without masks. And not everyone knows how to withstand this inner gaze. Here many women misinterpret the moment, confusing intensity with progress, believing that intermittent closeness is a sign of awakened love. It is not always that. Sometimes it is just a system trying to regain control. Your task is not to decipher it, but to hold yourself. When you do not move out of fear, when you do not fill the empty spaces, he faces something new, his own emptiness. And this encounter can transform him or drive him away. What is important is this: hear it calmly. Your dignity does not accelerate processes, it reveals them. When he approaches from presence, you will feel it. When he approaches from fear, you will feel that too. The difference lies in stability. Love born from fear needs constant proof. Love born from respect seeks coherence. And by not abandoning your center, you become the natural filter that separates one from the other, without saying a single word. At this point, the dynamic has already begun to reverse. Before, you were the one measuring time, words, gestures. Now it is him. He observes whether you remain available, whether something softens, whether you begin to adapt again. And when you don't, an uncomfortable yet revealing feeling appears. He no longer has you secured. Not because you are leaving, but because you are no longer dependent. It is this emotional independence that most strongly reorganizes his perception of value. Jung claimed that authentic desire arises when the other cannot be possessed, only found. Your dignity removes you from the place of emotional object and restores you to the place of subject. And that changes the gaze. You are no longer the one who is always there. You are the one who chooses to be there. This difference seems subtle, but it transforms the experience of bonding completely. Because now he relates not to your devotion, but to your conscious presence. This is also a delicate stage for you, because when he shows fear or confusion, it can awaken your old role to soothe, explain, hold. This is where it is decided whether your dignity is identity or strategy. If you reload the bond, the system returns to what is familiar. If you hold your ground, something new installs itself, not out of coldness, but out of inner coherence. And this coherence begins to demand a clearer position from him. Some men rise at this point, becoming more present, more emotionally responsible. Others dilute, not because you did something wrong, but because the level has risen and dignity does not negotiate its height. You don't push, you don't threaten, you simply do not lower yourself. And this redefines the bond without confrontation, because real respect is not imposed, it is embodied. And when it is embodied, it can no longer be ignored. I want you to notice something important. When he begins to change, it is not because you convinced him, it is because your integrity confronted him with himself. And when he does not change, that is not failure, it is information. Your dignity saves you years of confusion. It shows you who can meet you at your level and who could only love you when you made yourself smaller. This clarity hurts at first, but liberates in the long run. In the next step, we will enter the point of no return. When he understands that he can no longer return to the version of you that bent, an ultimate inner decision appears. Not always conscious, but determining. And depending on how you hold yourself there, this decision can transform him deeply or seal the final ending with an elegance that was not possible before. Step 4. The moment he understands there is no return. The version of you who waited, who adapted, who gave in to maintain the bond, is not coming back. And this certainty does not arrive through conversation. It arrives through an irreversible inner feeling. He can no longer provoke the same reaction from you. He can no longer rely on your emotional availability. Something has closed, not out of resentment, but out of coherence. And when that happens, his mind stops testing and begins to decide from a deeper place. Here a silent grief appears. He does not mourn your physical absence. He mourns the loss of a dynamic that gave him security without effort. And that hurts more than you imagine, because facing a woman who does not shrink forces one to accept one's own limits. Jung referred to this point as the death of a projection. You no longer carry his emptiness, and when the projection falls, only two paths remain: to mature or to withdraw emotionally. If he chooses to stay, something changes in the way he looks at you, no longer out of comfort, but out of conscious respect. He begins regulating himself, taking emotional responsibility, measuring what he offers, not out of fear of losing you, but because he understands that he cannot keep you from the same level as before. Your dignity raised the standard without demanding it. And this movement redefines the bond. You are no longer refuge, you are encounter. And not everyone knows how to love from that place. If he chooses to leave, the closure is also different. There is no ongoing drama, no endless back and forth. There is a clear sense of inner boundary. You do not chase explanations, you do not try to convince. And that leaves a mark. Because even though he leaves, he takes with him a reference that cannot be erased, that of a woman who did not negotiate her axis for love. That image returns later, when other dynamics no longer suffice. This point is crucial for you, because this is where doubt usually appears. Was I too firm? You were coherent, and coherence is never excess. The love that only survives when you shrink is not love. It is dependence. Your dignity destroyed nothing valuable. It merely revealed what could not sustain itself at your level. And though it hurts to let go, something inside you begins to rest. There is no constant tension anymore, no silent self-betrayal. Jung would say that this is where your true individuation begins. You no longer define yourself by being chosen. You define yourself by choosing yourself. And this identity transforms all your future bonds, because now you love not from lack, but from presence. You are not seeking to be enough, you already are. And this energy changes the way others approach you, not through demand, but through recognition. Your dignity becomes the natural filter. This step marks the definitive before and after. It does not matter whether he comes back or not. You will not return to the version of yourself who waited for crumbs. And that is the real victory. Because now you know you do not need intensity to feel value, nor promises to stay grounded. Your calm becomes home, and only someone who knows how to inhabit it without trying to disrupt it to feel superior can enter. Many men remember this type of woman not with romantic nostalgia, but with delayed respect, because she was the one who showed them the boundary they could not cross. And this boundary, far from closing them off, confronted them with themselves. You did not teach through discourse, you taught through embodiment. And that is what remains when everything else dissolves with time. I want you to breathe here, because this is not a point of hardness. It is a point of calm. You no longer have to hold the unholdable. You no longer have to translate yourself to be loved. Your dignity did not isolate you, it ordered you. And when you are ordered within, the outside world begins to respond differently. Not always quickly, not always easily, but always more truthfully. In the next and final step, we will close the circle. What happens when you integrate this as identity, not as a reaction to a particular story? How will your way of loving and being chosen be rewritten? There, where you no longer define yourself by who stays, but by what you will never again allow. This is the point where love stops hurting and begins to feel genuine. Step 5. When you integrate dignity as identity, not as a response to a wound. Here you no longer act from the past, you act from presence. Your decisions do not seek impact, they seek coherence, and that is noticeable. Your yes carries weight, your no rests. There is no urgency to define anything because you are already defined from within. This stability changes the way you are perceived because there are no emotional cracks through which someone could enter to negotiate your worth. At this point, love stops being a constant test. You no longer need signs to feel safe. Your body is aligned with your boundaries, your words with your actions, and this congruence, mantle, so simple and so rare, becomes magnetic, not through seduction, but through clarity. Whoever approaches feels it, and whoever cannot hold it withdraws quietly. Dignity does not argue, it organizes the field. Something subtle happens here. You begin to notice that you no longer hook onto vague promises or intensity without direction. Your system recognizes the difference between presence and performance. That saves time, energy, and illusions. You do not become demanding, you become precise. And emotional precision is a language understood only by those willing to connect without games. The rest falls away on its own without friction. Jung spoke of integration as the act of stopping the fragmentation we do to please others. That is what you are doing here. You no longer separate what you feel from what you allow. You no longer negotiate your intuition to maintain a bond. And when someone tries to cross a boundary, your body reacts before your words. There is no anger, there is elegant withdrawal. And that withdrawal, far from closing the heart, protects it. This is the point where many say, well, Tom, I no longer attract the same type of people. Exactly. Because you are no longer sending signals from lack. Your dignity changes the frequency. You no longer call in those who need to be carried. You call in those who can carry themselves, and that does not guarantee quantity. It guarantees quality. Less noise, more truth. Less fear, more choice. Your love life does not simplify because you love less, but because you love yourself more. Here, the memory of him loses its power, not because he was unimportant, but because he is no longer at the center. You are the center now, and from there the past reorganizes itself without bitterness. You are grateful for what you learned, and you move on. There are no open accounts, but inner closures. This is true liberation. Not when he comes back or asks for forgiveness, but when you no longer need him to be at peace. This shift is noticeable even in silence. You no longer explain your boundaries, you no longer justify your choices, you simply act in coherence. And that coherence becomes your new normal. Whoever arrives too late feels it. There is no accusation, only natural distance. Dignity does not build walls, it establishes thresholds. And only those who know how to cross without invading may enter. When you look back, you understand something crucial. You did not lose love. You gained inner structure, and that structure is the foundation of every healthy bond. Without it, love overflows and hurts. With it, love contains itself and grows. Jung would say that this is the point where the bond stops being compensation and becomes real encounter. Two emotionally mature people who choose each other, not need each other. This is the legacy of your dignity, not to change anyone, but to move yourself to a different place, to step out of the role of constant option and into the role of conscious choice. And from there, everything reorganizes. Your relationships, your energy, your decisions. You no longer chase, you attract presence. You no longer fear losing, you trust your ability to choose better. And now as you close this cycle, remember this, for it carries everything that came before. Your dignity does not distance you from love. It leads you to the right kind. It does not make you inaccessible. It makes you authentic. And when you are authentic, love stops being a battle and becomes a home. From here you do not go back, because you no longer seek to be chosen. You choose yourself. Step 6. When everything reconfigures itself from within, you no longer act from reaction, you act from identity. This is the point where dignity stops being a concept and becomes your natural way of being in the world. You do not ask yourself what to do so someone will stay. You ask whether the bond honors who you are now. And this quiet question guides every decision. There is no urgency, no fear. There is a steady calm that is no longer negotiable. Something deep happens here. Your nervous system learns that love does not have to hurt to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with connection, nor sacrifice with commitment. Your body recognizes when something is healthy and when it is not. And this inner intelligence saves endless explanations. You do not need to close cycles with words. You close them with coherence. And this coherence is felt even in your silence, even when you say nothing. Many men never forget a woman like this, not because she was perfect, but because she was whole, because she did not betray herself to be chosen, because she showed, without speaking, what someone who respects herself looks like. Jung said that what is not integrated repeats itself, and you broke the repetition. In doing so, you became an inner reference point for anyone who knew you. Not all appreciate it in the moment, but all remember it. This is the place where love stops being a psychological game. There are no more tests, no more strategies, no more roles to perform. There is presence, there is mutual choice. And if there is not, there is still peace. Because your worth no longer depends on being desired, but on being true to yourself. This inner loyalty is the foundation of every worthwhile bond. Without it, everything becomes negotiation. With it, everything aligns. I want you to hear this gently. Not everyone can love you from this level. And that is not a loss. It is a natural purification. Your dignity does not exclude, it filters. It allows entry only to those who can hold a relationship without depending on your self-abandonment. And even though the path becomes more selective, it also becomes lighter, less noise, less confusion, more truth. When you integrate this, you no longer look back with guilt, you look back with understanding. You understand why you gave in, why you waited, why you adapted, And you also understand why you cannot do it anymore, not because you are harsh, but because you have grown. And growth requires letting go of old versions of yourself. That too is self-love, one that does not need to prove itself, only to remain steady. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the most courageous human act. Becoming who you truly are, even if it means losing bonds that existed only out of dependency. You have taken that path, and in doing so you changed the way you love, choose, and allow yourself to be chosen. You no longer seek to complete yourself, you share from fullness. This is the kind of love that does not wear out. If this message reached you, stay a moment longer, give a like and subscribe. Small actions that allow this space to grow with you. And tell me in the comments which part resonated with you the most, because when we share from truth, YouTube amplifies what we choose together, and this kind of reflection reaches only those ready to hear it. Do not forget this as you close the video. Your dignity is not a barrier, it is a lighthouse. It does not chase love away, it guides it. And anyone who comes to you from now on will do so knowing they cannot take you for granted, but can find you through choice. That is the difference between a bond that consumes and one that endures. Today you leave not with techniques, but with an embodied truth. You do not need to prove your worth or convince anyone to stay. Your mere presence, aligned and steady, already says everything. As a final reminder, integrate this sentence to accompany you from now on, for it defines your new place. I am the boundary that teaches how to love truthfully.